Okay, so thank you so much, Michael, for being on my podcast. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So my name is Michael Fritzius. I'm a multipreneur. I run a full service podcasting agency called Podcastify Me. And I also own a company with my wonderful wife, Charlotte, called Exactly Zero. And we have four girls, ages right now 8, 10, 12, and 14. That's about to change next month. So it's going to be stale information, but we're a busy family of six. We homeschool. We live in St. Louis, and we're living life as hard as we can every single day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just wanted to know because I've known you for a couple of years, and I know that you've told me you started in tech first, and then you started going into creating your own business into podcasting. So I was just curious, how did you make that transition?
I got pushed. I got shoved off the ledge, Pooja. No, it so it was a really gradual transition, when I look at my career and compare to the journey that other people have had, and I thought, I kind of eased into this. It's fast and furious now, but when I started off in tech, the intent was, get a good, solid, stable five, maybe six-figure job and just kind of nestle in, climb the corporate ladder, get there when we get there. And from there, it went into contracting and then it went into consulting. And then that consulting gig actually dried up. I got let go. They gave me a month's notice. They really liked me, but that was the legacy side of the house. And they were like, we got to cut. It's nothing personal. But that was the push that I needed in order to actually launch the LLC and secure my first client in the tech space. And from there, it was more and more independence. It was, hey, I got all my eggs in one basket. I got one client. There's another one lining up and stuff. And I had to diversify and have multiple clients and then hire people. And it's just, ooh, it's fun. It's fun. But yeah, it's been steady steps, like gradual ding, 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 further and further down the line.
Yeah, I guess I can relate because I actually started in tech. So I'm always curious on how people start from one position and then completely go into like a completely different career. I guess my question is, how did you know when to like get out of corporate life, and how did you know that it was time to make that leap or make that jump out?
Right. How did I know when it was time? I technically did not know that it was time. I didn't actually know that that's what was coming. So I had a job years ago where, looking back, I know that I wasn't emotionally mature. I didn't learn this kind of stuff. I didn't really learn things about social skills and communication until well into college. So I've I've had some practice under my belt in the last 20 plus years, but back in the day, I dare say I just did not know how to manage. I thought everybody was out to get me. I thought, you know, the solution for feeling like you're not doing enough is to do way more. This concept of 10x is easier than 2x wasn't even on my radar. Shoot, the book wasn't even out back then. And when I made that first leap into something that resembled an entrepreneurial lifestyle, it was, I have to get out of this place. I have to leave. And it was time. And the first thing that came up happened to be a contracting role. So I was like, oh, everybody was like, oh, contracting is scary. I mean, you can lose your job at a moment's notice. Well, fact is, you can lose your job at a moment's notice, even as a W 2 employee. Nobody's safe. I think the audience that this is going out to will probably resonate with that. So I don't think it's going to be scary saying the quiet part out loud. But that was the first jump, was to get out of this perceived safety of a well-paying job and jump into something that was a little bit more well-paying, but it still was kind of spooky. It's like, ooh, what if I get let go? What then? We got kids and we got more on the way. What the heck? So, but yeah, I didn't know that it was going to lead. I just knew I had to get out because it was affecting my health. Like, when you're under so much stress, and you've probably felt this before, is it has a physiological effect on you. And I was constantly just running and gunning all the time, all the time. And when I entered into that new role, the leadership was far and away different from anything else that I'd ever seen. I actually dealt with tension headaches for like 2 weeks. And I was talking to Charlotte. I'm like, why does my whole head hurt? Like, why? Uh, what's going on? And she's like, well, you're unwinding. You just spent like the last 4 years at a place where you were just, and you're untangling and it hurts. It's painful. So I didn't realize that was what was going on, but that is the impetus that led me to take that first jump.
Yeah, so I can relate because I also worked in tech, so I can understand the stress of having to meet people's expectations. Do you feel when it comes to having your own business, what type of things that you like about having your own podcasting business?
Well, what I like about it doesn't even have to do with podcasting. It really has more to do with seeing the kind of person that I'm becoming. I know we've known each other for about 3 years now. Have we had our third anniversary? Have we known each other 3 years? It's been a while. The way that I used to be in my 20s, the way that I used to be in my 30s is drastically different. There's something that happened about, well, actually, when I turned 40, and I'm 43 now, where something just snapped in a good way. Like I felt like, you know how some men, they turn 40 and they're like, oh, they just sound like Eeyore. They're like, it's time to have a midlife crisis. Like I didn't feel that way. I'm like, I'm just getting warmed up, babe. Let's rock and roll, do it. And something happened in me where I realized, holy gee whiz, I have got unlimited potential. Not just unlimited potential, unlimited capability. And then I thought, how far can I push this? Like, if I really don't have any limits, if they're all perceived, if they're all parking brakes that I've put on as a protective measure, or they've been put on me by society or parents or family or employers, whatever, if I start disengaging them, what am I going to be capable of? And I'm still disengaging them. Like, it's happening faster than ever, but the speed at which I'm having breakthroughs is amazing. I'll tell you an example. I just had one this weekend, so it's less than 48 hours old. And I thought, I have had issues. It kind of vacillates between, oh, I want to check my emails, or I want to just shut off the phone and turn it upside down and put it in a bucket or something and just not look at it. And I realized, I'm like, well, I know what this is. It's FOMO. It's fear of missing out. And for once in my life, I asked myself, Fritz, what are you afraid of missing out on? Like, what are you mowing about? Like, what's the MO, right? What are you missing out on? And I thought, well, I think I'm afraid that I'm going to miss a piece of bad news that I need to react to. But then I said, well, one of your core principles is responsiveness over reactiveness. You don't want to let something happen where it's like, oh, it just throws you into a tizzy and you just react and blah, 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 and just make a big mess out of things. You want to be responsive. And then it's almost like I was telling myself now, statistically, how often do you get bad news? How often do you get an email that says, hey, a client just dropped their service? Well, pretty rare. Like, I mean, the last time that happened was like 8 or 9 months ago. It hasn't happened since then. Everything else has been, okay, let's have a talk, a question. There's something unclear, there's communication, but it can wait. And right then I realized I'm afraid of missing out on something that isn't actually, I'm going to miss it. I don't need to check my emails all the time. And just having that shift of perspective is like, that's a parking brake. That's off. One down, 753 to go. I'm getting there. I'm getting there faster every day. But that's the best part. That's the best part. When people tell me, hey, what's the quickest path to self improvement? I'm like, bro, start a business. And they're like, I'm not kidding. Start a business. Like when you're pushed to the end of yourself, and you don't think you've got anything left in the tank and you dig deep and find some strength that you're like, oh, surprise, I didn't know that was there. You learn more about yourself and what you're capable of than ever. So that's what keeps me going. I could be running any business and still be enjoying the entrepreneurial journey. Doesn't have to do with podcasting at all. Isn't that weird?
No, I agree. I think like when I started a business, I kind of did it for the same reasons that a lot of people want to start a business. Is like you want to make your own hours, um you want to not have to rely on someone else. You want to work for yourself. And then you go into it and you're like, "Oh, that's it takes time for those type of goals to pan out." But then I realized how much I feel like all of my flaws got amplified. Like all of those things, all the things that was putting in the back burner of like all of those things that I didn't want to like deal with, I had to deal with. So it's kind of like it's a blessing and a curse in some ways where it's like if you want to improve, it's there for you to do that. But then
Yeah,
if you don't want to and you just want to run your own business, it's kind of hard to do that. Um,
yeah,
it's really hard to just ignore that part.
yeah. I had to laugh because when you said, yeah, it amplifies the things that are in your life, it amplifies your shortcomings. Yo, so does having kids. Like when they act like you times 10 and it's a bad behavior and it's like, stop that. But then it's like, doggone it, they learned that from me. Mm. So, but I get it. And and that's one thing too that, like you said, some people go into being an entrepreneur and they've got the Instagram idea. Oh, I'm gonna get a Lambo. It's gonna be great. I'm just gonna be walking around eating Dippin' Dots with aviators on or whatever they do or something. It's like they're in love with the image of being an entrepreneur. But when it comes to like the deep inner work, the process, it sucks. It is painful. It is one of the hardest things that someone will undertake. I think if you're doing it right, it's gonna hurt. And that's why so many entrepreneurs fails because they don't actually like the process. They like the result. They want to be at the summit of Everest, but they don't want to grind through and walk across the crevices and risk falling and dying to get there. They just want to be, can I just get airlifted there? And it's like, no, there is no short path to this. You've got to do the work. You've got to. And I'm weird. I love the process. So that's my background.
Yeah, so I wanted to delve more into like what for your podcasting services, like what type of process do you have with the clients that you work with?
Sure. So our process is built custom for everybody. We've tried having steady packages where it's like, okay, you get in at this level, you get this level of service, and it's like nobody gets in at the standard level because everybody's different. Everybody's got a unique baby that they need care for. So our approach is really like we care a lot about, like I mentioned, responsiveness, but we care also about communication, clear communication, and the handoff of what does success look like is what we really hone in on. We got to make sure we stick the landing because ultimately we don't want them to have to thoroughly review every piece of work that comes out of our team because we're providing a time saving service. So the process looks like this. Once we onboard somebody, let's say they have a show that they want built from scratch. Great. We're going to dig in and we're going to find out about their ideal client profile. Who are those ideal clients of? What's the ecosystem look like? What's in your toolbox? What's in your pantry? Or do you have a book, a course, a mastermind, high ticket, consultation, one-on-one group, whatever? And we assemble all of that, figure out branding, the fonts, the style of the interview, the music, everything. It's gonna be flavored for the person that's gonna be hosting the show. And then when we build that out, then the edit process and sorry, publish. We publish the episodes. We edit, publish, and promote the episodes. And the editing part is more hands-on at the start. So we'll build out a checklist that says, okay, when you let us know that a raw episode is out there ready for us, and they've got it on Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive, wherever it is, we'll go fetch it, and then we're going to edit it according to these criteria. So it's like Step one, do this. Step two, do that. Step three, do that. And I liken it to a cake recipe. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a recipe, and then we're going to bake the cake, and then we're going to feed you a bite of it. And if you like it, that's awesome. We're just going to keep making the cake the same exact way. If you take a bite and you're like, well, then we need to change the recipe because we don't want, we want yay. So we're going to change up that checklist and make sure that it is agreeable to you. Once that's done, then we just keep applying that same process again and again and again so that you know, hey, they're sticking to this set of steps that we all uh, agreed on together, so we know how this is being done. Every single episode that goes through that same checklist she'll have the same exact results. And then we clip it up into micro content, like what you and I were talking about before we hit the record button, and we publish that, and we just make this nice gushy party that surrounds that person. It builds their ecosystem and helps them attract the right kinds of people, and then with a clear sales process in place, some of those people are going to convert and become clients. They're going to take action and say, I need to go hear that full episode. I need to buy their book. I need to like find out more about. At least they know what they're talking about. I need to get on a call with them. I need to go to Orlando and hang out at a mansion with them for 2 weeks. Whatever it is, that podcast is that hub of activity. So that's what we do. We do. It's going to look different for everybody, but that's generally what we do for all of our clients.
Yeah, so I would say like when I first talked with you, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember one of our conversations. I was talking about the different metrics or KPIs that people come to you for for a podcast, and you said one of the metrics is to build a relationship or build a networking opportunity for someone. And I thought that was kind of genius, and I don't think a lot of people highlight that aspect of a podcast. So I just wanted to, um, if you could like help explain more on that type of uh, metric.
Yeah, sure thing. So it is a metric. Like I know we're using the word metric. It can be a somewhat difficult thing to measure. You're gonna measure it with your heart for the most part, and that's not meant to be a cop out. It's just something you're gonna feel. If you have a strong relationship with somebody that you didn't have a strong relationship with before, if they all of a sudden become a person that's in your inner circle and you're like, I really like talking with that person. Like, I don't know why, that's notable. That's noticeable, right? If you've got a good CRM that will allow you to keep track of how frequently you're contacting people, you should know that, or you should notice anyway, that you're going to be contacting certain people more frequently simply because you want to be closer to them. And they might not become a client, but the more you build that relationship, the faster you build it, the more likely they are to become even a referral partner or somebody that sends leads your way or an affiliate or something like that, or they may become a client later on down the line. Now the flip side is you're right, a lot of people come to us and they are thinking in terms of to have a successful podcast, you got to have a bajillion listeners, and then eventually you'll start attracting the attention of corporate sponsors. And it's like, yeah, that's a way to go about it, but with so many podcasts being born every single day, it becomes an arms race. Like everybody's vying for attention, everybody's vying for eyes, ears, thumbs. They want that attention. So rather than try to play that and cater to those viewership metrics, which honestly, just between you and me and everybody else listening, that stuff can be gamed. I was just talking with somebody earlier today. She had gotten approached by someone who said, yeah, we can get all kinds of listenership for your podcast if you let us do that. And she found out later on that the hits all come from Russia. And she's like, that's kind of odd. I said, yeah, it sounds like they're using a click farm. They just got a bunch of phones set up that listen for a little bit, for a couple minutes or however long it takes to have Spotify say, hey, that's a listen. That's great. And they're all coming from Russia. It's like that's you can get a million listens doing that, but it's like people didn't actually listen and take action. They didn't connect at a heart level. So that's why I focus on the relationships. And it is more difficult, like I said, but things in life that are worth doing are often a lot harder or even a little bit harder. So we focus on that.
Yeah, I actually didn't know about that with Spotify. I know it happens a lot with social media, and it's not just like fake accounts. I know that there's like services um, that offer like paid organic social media content. And what I mean by that is they'll just like have a couple of people who are real people who will just get paid to organically comment on people's feeds. So they're kind of getting paid to do organic content as well to drive up someone's like social media profile, which is like a kind of like a loophole of besides getting fake accounts to do it.
Right. It's a real
But
live organism that's actually typing the thing in, but it's not what you and I think of as organic. Organic is, hey, uh, the stuff that I'm putting out is resonating well with this category of person. And so that platform's algorithm is picking that up and saying, hey, let's show this to more people like that. That's organic. That's organic. But it's not just like organically just sitting there typing with your carbon based fingers and typing in comments. That's cheating. That's cheating, Pooja. Let's just call it what it is.
yeah, so I was just curious, like, because I focused a lot with like nonfiction authors, but a lot of them may have services or they're trying to expand other ways that they can get their name or platform out there. How would you, like, if someone was just starting a podcast or if they wanted to begin, how would you show them, like, what are the basic steps that they would need if they wanted to do it themselves?
Well, the first and I would say arguably most important step is don't even focus on a podcast just yet. This is the part that people fall down on a lot is they don't do the deep work of who their ideal client profile is in the first place. They jump immediately into start a podcast. And I can tell you that that happens because I did that and it did not work. And when I drilled in and said, okay, well here's the actual kind of person that I want to reach out to and why and what it is that they would get out of being a guest on the show, like what's in it for them. What kinds of people do I want to build relationships with and why? And it took a while. It took a while because I already had a podcast, so I pivot, and I finally got to where it was like, yeah, this feels pretty good. It's getting the right results. Let's rock and roll. So uh, that's the first step. That really is the first step is to understand deeply, like even down to like a first name basis, an avatar of somebody that you want to attract. Like if you had a podcast out there that was capable of attracting a person, who is that person? And then what would the podcast have to look like in order to attract that person? And you may even ask that person if you've got somebody that you love working with, or there's a kind of person that you love working with, or if there's a group of them, if they're congregating, ask them the question and say, hey, I'm thinking about starting up a podcast. And, candidly, it's meant to attract people like you. So what kinds of podcasts do you think you would guest on? And they'll tell you. And then you can just build a podcast and come out and remember that thing we talked about a couple weeks ago? It's ready. Just come on in. I'd love to chat. But that's the first one. I mean, there are no two podcasts that are the same. And that's the other thing too, is you used the term organic earlier. It's a very organic thing. They don't stay the same. They will stagnate if they never change. So they constantly grow and evolve and shift and pivot and things like that. But have a place that you would host it. It could be Spotify, it could be Apple Podcasts, it could be YouTube, it could be a video podcast. Have a place where you're gonna put the recordings and just try some different things like how would you involve the guest in getting the outreach? How would you what kind of content would you make? Do you do short form? Do you do long form? Do you repurpose it? Do you use it to sell a book? Do you turn it into a blog and turn the blog into a book? Like there's lots of different things you can do with it. And that was one thing, that was another parking brake that I had to let off was to let go of the idea that there's a handful of right ways to go about doing something like building a podcast. There's really not. There's an infinite number of right ways. The one result is get better relationships with the kind of people you want to have relationships with. And using a podcast, that gives you so many options. That gives you so many options to work with. It's crazy. That's the secret.
Yeah,
Just run out and run with scissors and have fun.
yeah,
Don't
I think
actually run
that's
with scissors.
when it comes to when it comes to like running a podcast, I know a lot of authors, they may not be ready to start a podcast, but they know that they want to promote their book and they want to be guests on podcasts. So I was just curious on first, like how can an author who has no idea, who's just starting out in the podcasting world, how can they go and start booking roles or booking as a guest on other people's podcasts? And what are things that would be good for them to like look out or be or to consider on being a good podcast guest?
That is an amazingly deep question. So, being an author, you've actually got a huge advantage over people who have never written a book in their life. There are a lot of people out there that have thought, I should write a book one day, but they never get around to it because they haven't overcome that limitation of, I have a story worthy to share, and I believe that it's worthy to share. I've got experience that would benefit some people if only they heard it. And so the people that have written a book, that have crossed that threshold to become an author, they've overcome that. So the first thing that I would say is lean into that energy. Okay. You've got the ability to tell an amazing story. You wrote a book, right? You shared a piece of your soul and you wrote it down and you got it out there for the world to experience. Hardly anybody can say that. So if you enter into the podcasting world leaning on that energy, that means you have the ability to guest on all kinds of shows. And this is the other I think shortcoming, that if you and I are talking about, hey, what kind of podcast should we guest on? We're probably going to gravitate toward business podcasts, right? We're both entrepreneurs, Pooja. And I would say, yeah, that's like a free bingo square, but you've got life experience that I don't have, and vice versa. You've got hobbies and interests I've never even heard about. I'm into things that there's some crazy hobbies out there. That sounds a little sketch. They're clean hobbies. They're family friendly hobbies. I promise. But they're facets of me. They're facets of who I am as a person that I can go onto a show that doesn't have anything to do with what I do for making money. And I can connect with the people who host the show, and I can connect with their listeners, and they can learn more about who I am as a person. And then they see a couple facets of me and my background. And then if they happen to run across me in some other venue and they see other facets of me, and then over here they see other facets of me, it's like, man, this dude's everywhere. Like, where the heck? What? He's like the most interesting man in the world. It's like, I mean, I'm not really. I am pretty interesting if I say so myself. Brush, brush. But it's like, it's just the ability to show off multiple facets of yourself. And we sell ourselves short about how complex and wonderfully built we are in our background every single day. Every event that happens, multiple events a day, all go toward building something unique in our journey. And a lot of us just don't see that. So it may seem like a highfalutin foo-foo answer, but that's really the trick, is realize you've got massive intrinsic value. And being an author, you've got the ability to share those stories. Like, focus on just a little bit of your background and share it with the world. Find a podcast that talks about that and go talk about it in depth. And people are like, holy moly, I really know this person, this aspect of them super deep. And then when they start noticing you elsewhere, you become more real, you become more three dimensional. The people that are viewed as real, they're the ones that get the results that we're talking about today. So,
Yeah, so I I know that you have a special offer that you wanted to share. So, and I know it's called the Big Give. So, could you tell me more about the offer that
sure. So, the big give is something that Podcastify Me does to give back to the podcasting world. It's built for podcast hosts. And what we do is we allow them to list their show on our website. And I mentioned, business category, there's arts, there's finance, there's home and leisure, family, like all the different major categories like what you'd find on Apple Podcasts. It's searchable, so people can show up in the directory and say, I just want to look at, other or true crime or TV and movies, those podcasts, then they can go right there and find just those shows. But what we do is once they're listed, then we allow people to apply to be a guest on that show. We put an application form in where if a guest sees a show and they're like, that looks like a really cool show, I think I want to put my hat in the ring and go for it, then they got to put in their name, their email, a brief bio, what they hope to get out of the show, a couple other odds and ends, like if there's extra questions that the host wants to have on there, we can add that, no problem. And then they submit it. So when they submit that, the host gets an email saying, hey, somebody wants to be a guest on your show. Click here to see what they said. And then they have the opportunity to put their, it's like kind of walk them through the workflow. So somebody applied. Okay, I read their input. Yeah, that looks like a really good person. Great. Let's move them to the next column where they can get sent the scheduling link. If they're not really a good fit, they can move them to the decline column and our system will send emails around. It's all automated communications. You don't have to do anything except drag a card to the next lane, and our system takes care of all of those emails on your behalf. But the end result is we want to provide a seamless way for podcast hosts to get guests without having to jump through all kinds of hoops and stuff. Like, let's build the hoops in, and then we'll go from there. Something else that we do in addition, which this part is free, but if somebody wants a bunch of these, then they have to pay. But we actually make a few trading cards, and I don't know if this is going to be a video. This video
Yes, it will be.
video show. Awesome. Okay, well then I'm going to show this card. So this is a trading card. This is my friend Tina Meeks, who is really, really excited about working with us. That's the front of the card. And then on the back, it's got all the information about the show. So you got the description here, you got the show categories here, and then a brief blurb about the best kind of guests for her show. That QR code at the bottom takes you to the landing page that we talked about at the very beginning. So these are great for in-person networking. It's like a super duper business card, but it leads people directly to your landing page. And being that it's a physical card, they're more likely to hand it over to somebody else once they guest on the show. Like, yeah, I really had a blast on that show. I'm going to hand this to another person. She ordered 500 of those cards. So once she gets them all out of her hands, there's 500 of these things in circulation, constantly moving around. These people are going to networking groups. Oh, I was on Tina's show not too long ago. This is great. Here's her card. If you scan that code at the bottom, you can guest on her show or apply anyway, and it's great. Now that's organic. That is organic marketing right there. I tell you what. So anyway, long story short, that's what the big give is. It's big enough that when people see that, they're just like, "How the heck are you guys making money? Like, sure, like, is this all you do? No, we do all kinds of other stuff. It's just this is so big that it kind of scares people. People are worried I'm not eating
Yeah,
enough. Yeah,
that's such a great offer because it's really hard to figure out when you're first starting out. It's really hard to figure out how to get a guest or even how to bring on guest or how to be a guest on a podcast. That whole situation, and then also trying to figure out where like either you have to pay for it, um, and you have to go through trial and error, like going on podcasts and not knowing whether or not you're a good fit for a person. So it kind of just eliminates a lot of those like hassles starting out or people who don't really have the time to look or find podcast guests themselves and they just need someone else to do it for them. But then also the trading cards, that's also really I've never seen someone do that before. I when I think of cards, I think of business cards and that's it. But I didn't know it could be like utilized in other areas as well.
yeah. Well, it's good. That means I don't have any competition yet. So uh, don't air the show for another couple of years. That way I can get a good run. I'm kidding. Kidding. Now everybody's gonna be doing it. Doggone it! I was the first one. I should trademark these.
But that wraps up for this episode. And thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was fun. I love spending time with you.